Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Jnanavarthini FDBP's weekly knowledge session. In late 2022, the AICPA updated its guidance on performing system and organization controls attestations, SOC attestations that offer enhanced context for meeting the criteria and the. Today, we have Mr. Subbarayudu explaining these updates to us. He doesn't need an introduction in this group. Still, let me introduce him. Mr. Subbarayudu is founder director of Informasis Consulting and Advisory Services, Delaware, USA-based CPA firm, specializing in SOC 1-2 attestations, governance, risk and compliance, enterprise risk management, enterprise performance management, and business valuations. He is experienced in risk management, value creation, valuation, and value preservation. He is currently president of FDBPI Bangalore chapter. Over to you, Mrs. Bragg.
Thanks a lot, Manju. I think the SOC 2 framework got updated, but I need to update my introduction text. Good feedback. I hope I'm audible and the slide is clear and everyone can see.
Yes,
Very much.
Okay. So hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome once again. I think sometime in 22 July, I had made my first presentation on the SOC 2 framework. So how I have planned this session is for those of you who missed that or those of you who are a little new to SOC 2, first couple of slides, not couple of slides, maybe 7-8 slides, I'll quickly go through them. We'll tell you a little about what this SOC 2 framework is about and some key terminologies and concepts. Then I'll jump on to the changes that have been made in the 2022 update to the SOC 2 framework. While I'm just kind of going through the initial SOC 2 part, in case anybody has any questions, please feel free to stop me at that point. Because this was meant, the initial 7 to 8 slides are meant for people who might not be knowing too much about SOC 2. So before you talk about the 2022 framework, they might want to know what SOC 2 is about. So I just include a couple of slides there. So from an agenda point of view, what I have is, first a little about the SOC suite of services from AICPA, and a little about SOC for service organizations. And then what is the SOC 2 report structure? This is what I've covered, is planning to cover in the basics part before I jump to the 2022 changes. That is how I'm planning to go through. So without much, I think let's jump into the details right away. So basically, the AICPA SOC suite of services has got three broad categories. One is the SOC for service organizations, and the SOC 1, SOC 2, SOC 3 that is most common and popular. They fall within this SOC for service organizations bucket. There is also SOC for cybersecurity thing that AICPA has had come up with quite some time back. Now, this is as in the US, the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, had come out with a directive that any public organization will have to, as part of its disclosures that it files to the SEC in the Form 8K and Form 10Qs and all, they have to provide investors with a brief description of its cybersecurity controls in place. So those disclosures, they're like all, stock market disclosures and all, they're a little specific, and the inclusions and what to include, how to present it, there are some specific guidelines there. The SOC for cybersecurity framework talks about that. How can an organization describe its overall cybersecurity management system as part of its disclosures to the public, to the investing public and to SEC? That's what the SOC for cybersecurity framework is about. It has not seen as much traction as the SOC for service organization, and SOC for supply chain is still a relatively newer one. It is even less, but the SOC for cybersecurity is also an interesting one. Our SEBI in India has also come out with an equivalent thing about disclosure of cybersecurity related risks and all. This is just to tell people that, within the overall SOC suite of services, there are three components there. The SOC for service organizations, under this, there are two publications, which is, internal control reports on the service organization performed by a service organization, providing valuable information that users need to assess and address the risk as it is an outsourced service. Broadly, the need for this was felt, after the Sarbanes-Oxley and internal controls framework of the COSO had come out, uh, because of outsourcing, which was widely adopted by a lot of US corporations, the resulting situation was that a lot of the internal controls, which otherwise pre-outsourcing, the control might have been residing within the organization's boundaries. As a result of outsourcing, if those controls had crossed organizational boundaries and those activities were being performed by the organization to whom they had outsourced, the question was always that, as long as these activities are being performed in your organization, you had a certain degree of control. How do you give the assurance to investors, to a group of stakeholders, that the same level of controls are still being followed post outsourcing and offshoring? So this framework was developed by AICP at that point in time. The framework has got certain standardized procedures, standardized methods in which auditors can go perform an audit, standardized audit reports, types of reports. So this report is meant to be shared with the customer organization and customer organization auditors. That's what the software service organization is about. And SOC 1, SOC 2, and SOC 3, which can be of type 1 and type 2, we'll be primarily talking about within this section of it in this call. I hope the headlines and everything are visible because I am getting this. Okay. Software service system and organization control. So the full form of a SOC is SOC 2 is a system and organization control. It previously used to be called a service organization controls. So the system, what is the system that we really mean when we talk about what broadly it means is it is a combination of people, infrastructure, software, data, and procedures. All of these combine to define the system that is in scope. We can compare this with what is the statement of applicability in ISO 27001 audit. So like in ISO 27001, it need not necessarily be that the entire organization be covered in the ambit of a SOC 2 engagement. You can carve out certain business units or certain locations or certain applications, certain infrastructure, and define that in the system, and the control that as applicable on that system are the subject matter of the SOC 2 audit report. And preparing the system description is also an integral part, which is almost about 40% of the overall effort that goes out in preparing a SOC 2. The AECP's requirement document, DC200, is a publicly available document. One can Google it. It comes out in a PDF form. How to prepare the system description, what all should it contain, what disclosures should be made in this DC200, all those documents, all those guidelines are present in this DC200 document. And as part of an audit, it is the duty, responsibility of a CPA to ensure that the system description has been prepared in accordance with this guideline DC200. If it is not prepared, if something is missing, the CPA is expected to go back to the organization and point out the deficiencies. The organization is expected to complete those deficiencies, and the CPA is expected to satisfy himself that yes, indeed, the prepared system description in accordance with the DC200. And when you give an audit opinion, the first opinion mentions that whether the DC200, the system description prepared by the service organization, is in accordance with the DC200, yes or no. He has to confirm that before he goes about expressing an opinion as to whether the design of the system and the operating effectiveness of the system were okay during the audit period or not. First, he has to confirm whether the system description is prepared in accordance with the guideline. And attestation entities, CPA, CPA firms are required to be independent. Independence requirements of the AICP are fairly stringent and very, very different from ISO requirements. But a more detailed discussion, perhaps I'll not include in this session because it's only about the updates. They were there in the earlier detailed presentation on SOC 2 that I had made. But anybody wants, you can reach out to me. I can share that deck with you as well. Now, as they say, one more part of the high-level overview, which perhaps in one picture you can understand a bulk of what the SOC 2 audit happens. This is the image that we had created. And certain typical terminologies that are used. First is a service organization. A service organization is the organization which has requested the auditor to come and audit and give a report on its system. Okay. So they are the controls that are examined and reported upon in a SOC attestation engagement. Then beside the service organization, there is something called the user entity. This user entity is the one that is receiving the service of the service organization, typically a service organization's customers. If you're, let us say, an insurance company in the US, which has outsourced its back office insurance claim processing, then the BPO that is doing the claim processing is a service organization, and the insurance company in the US would be a user entity. And some controls that are operated by the user entity are called in SOC terminology complementary user entity controls, or CUECs. Okay, and then likewise, these could be the customers. Then those organizations behind in the value chain, that is who are providing services to the service organization. Say, for example, a cloud service provider. You have your application, you have your infrastructure, and you have hosted them on, let's say, AWS or Azure. Then the service organization behind you in the value chain, which is responsible for certain controls themselves, that is known as a sub-service organization, typically in a SOC 2 audit. So three entities: service organization, user entities, and sub-service organization. So the controls that are operated by the sub-service organization are called complementary sub-service organization controls. It looks like a mouthful, typical American terminology many times. To take an example, let's say if you have hosted your application in the cloud environment, right? To protect the physical security of the data centers, right? Environmental security within the data centers, and certain monitoring activities within the data centers, those kind of controls tend to go out of your hands, and then they pass on within the a vendor who's providing you the cloud hosting services. That's a classic example of complementary sub-service organization controls. Why it is important to delineate all of these controls is that when you are performing a SOC 2 audit, you are performing an audit. Most usually it is a carve-out approach. 99.99% of all audits are use the carve-out approach. What it means is the auditor who's auditing is only auditing the controls between these two boundaries that we are mentioning here. The auditor will not go and audit any control the sub-service organization is responsible for, nor will the auditor go and audit any control which the customer himself is responsible for. So the scope of your audit is within these two lines, and your audit report will also mention that you are only auditing. This is a service auditor CPA can use the services of a specialist. Final responsibility still remains the CPA signing the report. Many times what happens is, in case you find a certain competency gap within the team, you can engage the services of a specialist, say a cloud services specialist, who could come and advise you on those matters and all. But nevertheless, the responsibility still remains with the CPA who's signing the report. So if something goes wrong, he's responsible for it. And then there are two concepts called a carve-out approach and inclusive approach. So as you can see in this diagram, when a carve-out method is applied, the auditor's responsibility is limited. So in the audit report, once again, if you look at the language carefully in the audit report, the language is designed in such a way that it conveys to whoever is reading the report that the operating effectiveness that he has tested is only for the controls that are within the boundaries of the service organization, and not the controls within the either the sub-service organization or the user entity. That is what it says. Okay. So the inclusive method is the other one. It's a really complicated scope, and there are many organizations that also have got to be audited if the inclusive method is adopted. And at least I myself have seen very few audit reports in SOC 2 which adopt the inclusive method. It can really get complicated. And as part of the entire chain, what happens is the CPA who's audited the sub-service organization will give the SOC 2 audit report to the sub-service organization. The sub-service organization will share that audit report with the service organization. So when I go and audit a service organization, I can ask them to provide me a copy of the audit report of the sub-service organization. So an AWS SOC 2 audit report can be shared with the service organization with me. Okay. Likewise, this organization can share their audit report with the user entity. Okay. Quite a mouthful, quite a handful. I hope there's not too much any questions on this slide so far. Anybody?
Do software development company comes under service organization?
See, if the software development organization requires a SOC 2 report, okay, then the software development organization will be a service organization. Yes. but they themselves could be utilizing the services of some other sub-service organization. Say, for example, the software development organization is developing the software on the cloud, okay, right? And it's using cloud infrastructure, for example. Then they will have a sub-service organization in the form of AWS or Azure or whatever. Okay. So
But
to answer
as
your
such,
question,
third-party developers organization who develop the ERP and everything, they
yeah.
need not be treated as a service organization. Provided if the customer treats them as a service organization, they can demand.
Not really. We've got a lot of service software development organizations who are a client for whom we do SOC 2 audits. Okay. See, what happens is, let us assume that you are in Infosys, for example, right?
Yeah.
You're developing software for, let's say, an insurance claim processing application, right? There is some background. Nice. Yeah. So let us say you're developing an application there, okay? Or let us say after you've developed the application, you're also responsible for the maintenance also, okay? Irrespective of if you develop responsible maintenance or not, there are certain controls that you're expected to follow. So if the insurance company, they themselves will be undergoing a SOC 2 audit, but while undergoing a SOC 2 audit, their SOC 2 auditor can ask for a SOC 2 report of Infosys, where the scope would be restricted to the ODC, which is developing this software for the insurance application. Okay. So many software development organizations require SOC 2 audits, and we have done a lot of SOC 2 audit for software development organizations as well. So if you see, SOC 2 report will be required for everybody in the value chain, sir. Okay. The user entity themselves may be requiring a SOC 2 audit report. Okay. So when their CPA comes and performs the SOC 2 audit, he'll ask for the SOC 2 audit of the service organization. And when their SOC 2 audit is being performed, this auditor will be asked for the SOC 2 report of the sub-service organization. So that way what happens is the information security and the trust services criteria get percolated down to the entire supply chain that way. Okay. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Any more questions? Can I move forward? So this is about the role players inside the entire SOC 2 system. And quickly, I'll go through, the comparing. There in the SOC 1 report, SOC 2 report, and SOC 3 report. I think a lot of us, SOC 1 is basically focused on internal controls relevant for financial reporting, whereas SOC 2 is internal controls relating to our 5 trust services criteria: security, availability, processing integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. SOC 3 is a kind of an abridged SOC 2 report. Okay, where you don't have all the details that you give in a SOC 2, but an abridged report. This is publicly shareable, whereas a SOC 2 report is an internal restricted document, which only a narrow group of users should be having access to. Whereas SOC 3 is a report that you can upload on your website as well. If you go to AWS, you Google AWS SOC 3 report, you can download the SOC 3 report of AWS as well. So it's a public document. A shorter abridged report, SOC 2 is a detailed report, right? Then broadly, some concepts, you have type 1 and type 2. So both SOC 1 and SOC 2 reports can be either of type 1 or type 2. You can have SOC 1 type 1, SOC 1 type 2, SOC 2 type 1, SOC 2 type 2. Type 1 is basically, it only describes your controls and as of a specified date, whereas a type 2 is throughout a specified period. And here is where we see a major conceptual gap or confusion between ISO 27701 and SOC 2. When you go to perform a type 2 report, we typically look for, if it's a 12-month period, we ask for evidences throughout the 12-month period. Okay. So, because finally, when you give a report, a type 2 report, you are giving a report saying that the controls are operating effectively throughout the 12-month period. So the population selection and sample selection from within the population has to span the entire 12-month period, not just maybe the recent most 3 months or something. So as you can see, the suitability of the design of the controls and also whether the controls have been implemented. Lot of times, lot of companies also get a surprise when we ask for some preliminary or basic evidence just to ensure that the control that they're talking about is not a paper control, just a policy created. Has it actually been implemented on the ground is also the subject matter of a type 1 audit as well. Whereas at type 2, you are far more detailed audit. You see whether the controls are operating effectively throughout the audit period. That is the difference between a type 1 and a type 2. So with that, okay, a little more. What are the main components of a SOC 2 report? Most SOC 2 reports will have 4 components. First is a management assertion. Second is service auditor's report. Third is system description, as they talked about it as per DC 200. And fourth is a detailed test of controls and test results, which is only come if the report is, if the audit is a type 2 audit. Assertion is again a different thing. We don't come across in the ISO ecosystem. So the basis for performing a SOC 2 audit is first an assertion made by management. So the management of the organization is of course responsible for implementing controls, designing the controls and implementing the controls. So they first make an assertion that, okay, we have designed the controls and we assert that the controls meet the requirements of all the trust services criteria. This assertion is tested by the auditor as part of his audit procedures. If the management is not willing to provide an assertion, there's no question of an audit being performed. An assertion forms the basis of the audit. So that's what I wanted to do. The 4, and at times, if the type 2 report is a qualified report, for example, it is like, NCs in equivalent to NCs in an ISO 27001. If we have exceptions or a qualified report where you find that the controls are not operating effectively, or at least some of the controls are not operating effectively, you could go ahead and give what in our terminology is called a qualified report. Then the section 5 is what management can provide as a kind of an explanation. There's an unaudited section of the report, the only unaudited section of the entire SOC 2 report, where management can give explanations and provide their side of the story, and say that, okay, this is the reason why this control is not operating. We promise to take these remedial measures, and we believe we can close the gap within the next 3 months or 4 months or something. Those kind of statements is what management can make in section 5 of the report. But the auditor does not audit section 5. That's what. So there's a structure of a SOC 2 audit report, and there's DC 200, as we told. I don't want to dwell on this too much. So this is about the overall SOC 2 audit at very, very high level. If anybody has any questions on this, so far, I would like to now move on to,
Subbarayudu sir, just go back 2 slides back where we were discussing previous one, please. Yeah, previous one.
This one?
Previous one slide.
Okay.
Okay, one more previous, sorry.
Okay, this one.
Okay, stay here. Now, approximately, what would be the number of controls, let's say, comes under service organization? Approximately.
So it's I can tell you what ACP call the points of focus. Okay.
Okay.
The points of focus in a SOC 2, if let's say all 5 trust services criteria have been selected by an organization saying that is applicable, right? They are something like 329 as of now points of focus. Okay. The controls, an organization has to design. Now, one control can cover more than one point of focus, for example. Okay. For example, let's say privacy. Privacy has got 58 points of focus. Okay. But let's say the generally accepted privacy principles are about 10.
Right.
Okay. Now, they can be one control, but you can have 10 controls covering 58 points of focus as well. Okay. So I'll rather answer the question in terms of points of focus. The 328 points of focus you got to cover. The maximum there in security, which are 235 in number. Okay.
Okay.
19 odd are in availability, another 15 odd are in 15 are in processing integrity, 4 in confidentiality. Okay, that way. Okay. So there are 320.
And this 230 plus controls, what you're talking, or focus points, what you're talking about, could be mapped, I'm sure, against 27,001, correct?
Yes, the mapping is there. ACP themselves publish on ACP's website. Again, it's a publicly available document also. You don't have to be a member of the ACP also. You Google that, mapping, you can go to the ACP website, you can download that. It's an Excel file, I think. So there is ISO 27001 to SOC 2 mapping. There is other mappings are also there. I think, if I remember correctly, HIPAA to this cloud control matrix, for example, ACP CCM to SOC 2 mapping is also available. Okay?
Right.
So multiple framework. There's a cross mapping of controls from one framework to the other. quite a few of them are available actually. Okay.
Yeah, understood. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks, sir.
Sir, one more question, extension
Yeah,
to
yeah.
these. There are terms, terminologies which talk about COSO principle and common criteria.
Yeah.
So those things, maybe we can take it up in the end, if I'm not disturbing your flow. But I think those are things that probably if you can help us.
Actually, POSO principle, I had it in a more detailed presentation. For the sake of keeping this entire thing to about 1 hour, I cut that down.
Sure. So
we'll,
if that is there, we'll take it up there.
Yeah. Common controls are nothing. Answer your other question. Common controls are nothing but a security criteria. Okay. So if somebody goes for SOC 2, the bare minimum security principle must be covered. You cannot scope out the security principle. Okay. So the 320, the 235 out of 329 controls must be there. Points of focus must be there. Okay.
Right.
So they begin with CC, the common controls. They're 239 in number. Whereas the availability begins with A, there are about, I think, about 19, processing integrity 15, confidentiality 4, and privacy 58. Okay. So common control is nothing but a security criteria. Okay.
Okay.
Sir, Subbarayudu sir, just sorry for my understanding. Now, I'm assuming, let us say that when we are looking at 27,001, right? As you and me know that I'm looking at a management system, a set of policies, procedures, which is mapping to beautifully the requirements of the standard. Now, coming here, this kind of SOC 2, for a moment, if I assume that, no, they are not following 27,001, what is the framework they will be? So they need to have a set of policies, procedures, which is satisfy the 225 plus, right?
Yeah, that's the COSO framework.
Okay. That's what Ashok is asking.
Yeah. Entire SOC 2 is designed to ensure that the COSO framework of internal controls has been implemented by the organization, including even a little bit of COSO has got two frameworks. One is the ERM, Enterprise Risk Management Framework.
Correct.
And then the internal controls framework. Okay. So this everything is mapped to the COSO framework only. Okay.
Oh, beautiful. Now I got it. Thanks, sir. Thanks.
No, only difference is COSO cannot be audited or certified, whereas SOC can be certified by ACPA.
Yeah, correct.
COSO is just a framework, right? Which is helping you to set up these control systems.
Yeah, like COBIT, like similar to COBIT.
Correct.
Exactly.
No, COBIT, at least you can become an individual, right? Individually you can certify, right?
Yeah.
COBIT cannot be certified. ISACA, it comes from ISACA, so it cannot be certified actually. COBIT like a framework only.
Yeah, I think.
No, sir.
What I
COBIT 2019, if I want to be a certified as an individual, I think it's allowed. I can appear for an exam and then I can get that COBIT framework guy, if I'm right.
No, CISA, all the controls of COBIT is incorporated in the CISA syllabus.
Understood. Okay.
Okay, so I think let's, without much, let's move forward. I think we have some 22, 23 minutes. Okay, so now we're coming to the changes. So at a high level, if you want to say what are the headlines, okay, there are no changes to trust services criteria in the 2022. Same 5 trust services criteria as before, which include security, confidentiality, availability, PI, and privacy. Now this attestation standard SSAE 18 has been replaced with SSAE 21. Now there are certain additional changes also which are relevant for CPAs and CPA firms and all these things. Some of them relate to how to conduct engagements and those things are there. So I only include in this presentation the operational kind of which would be relevant for, let's say, information security professionals who want to say, okay, now I want to get certified, and since this 2022 update has come, what is the change for me? So broadly, a lot of changes have come in the privacy criteria and the security criteria as well. We'll go through them, and I've listed out there are 38 odd new points of focus that have been introduced. Okay, earlier it used to be some 290 or something, it has become 320, 329 plus. Okay, so what I've done here in the next few slides is I've classified them into different types. So the availability, there is only one new point of focus in the 2022 update. And what this talks about, if you see, this is the way the individual point of focus is worded. And I kept this format because I also wanted to kind of show the way the SOC 2 framework differs in over the ISO 27001. These individual points of focus are what we test for operating effectiveness when we go for our audits. If you see this A 1.2.11, there were 10 controls existing. The 11th one is the one. Considers data recoverability. Management identifies threats to data recoverability. For example, ransomware attacks that could impair the availability of the system and related data, and implements mitigation procedures is a new point of focus that AECP has come up with. Organizations are supposed to design their controls which meet the requirements of this point of focus. Okay. So then when we go for an audit, we'll ask us, what are the controls that you have implemented? Have you made any changes to the policy? Is there a new policy that you've brought about? For example, how do you deal with ransomware attacks? What are the controls that you've designed to ensure that you deal with ransomware attacks? And I think we all understand where this is coming from, because with the increase of rampant ransomware attacks, ACP thought that this new point of focus is important. We've got to perform this this test. So this is the new point of focus that has been brought about with respect to availability. Okay. So it talks about considers data recoverability. Okay. So this is on the new point of focus that has been brought in the availability criteria. Can I move forward, or any questions on this? Okay, no questions. I'll just move forward in the interest of time. Now, privacy has got 10 new points of focus. This is interesting. Now, one other change that ACP has made is, you see the C, 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 and P here, right, in the control. So what ACP has also done, like in ISO 27000, you've got two annexures. One annexure applicable to control that processes are expected to put in place, and another annexure, I think annexure D and annexure C, if I'm corrected, and the other annexure deals with control that data controllers are expected to put in place. One for data processors are expected to put in place. ACP has now explicitly classified their points of focus and said that this is a control that a processor is expected to put in place, and this is a control that a controller is expected to put in place. Earlier on, there used to be a lot of arguments, when people would come and say, hey, my client is only a data processor, so the privacy criteria is not applicable to him. Some fellows would argue with us. Okay, so to some extent, at least, ACP sought to quell those kind of disputes and mention that these kind of points of focus are relevant for companies who are data processors. So if you see some of these, reviews the privacy notice, process is defined to periodically review the consent of the privacy notice and to implement any identified updates. Data subjects are informed when changes are made to privacy notice and the nature of such changes. There's somewhere where we find a lot of policies falling short of this. How do you communicate to data subjects about the nature of the changes that you made to the privacy notice? Retains prior notices. Prior versions of the privacy notice are retained in accordance with internal requirements to document prior communications. There's a new point of focus that has come up. And then if you see this 5.1 and 5.2.1, response to data controller requests, this is applicable for processors. So what it asks is, the entity has a process to respond to the data subject requests received from data controllers in accordance with service agreements and privacy objectives. Such process may include authentication of the request, permitting access where appropriate, responding within a reasonable time, and notification if the request is denied. Now, many times what happens is that as a part of the contract between the processor and the controller might make the processor responsible to also address some data subject access requests that may come. In such cases, it is expected that the processor should have defined the process as to how he will handle such data subject access requests that he's receiving. So that is what this 5.1.1 is there. And 5.2.1, the entity is similarly worded thing, respond to data controller requests. The entity has a process to respond to data controllers update requests, including updates to personal information and denial of requests in accordance with service agreements and all. So this is talking about a specific category of data subject access requests. This is about updates to personal information. So this is one. And the next 5 in privacy, evaluate third-party compliance with privacy commitments. This is one of the more prescriptive controls, which now these kind of clauses might be there in the guidance that is mentioned in ISO 27701. But if you see, when this is formally included as a point of focus within the SOC 2 framework, we as auditors when we go to perform an audit, we would like to see what is the control that the organization has designed and put in place to respond to these points of focus. And then if it is a type 2 audit, we also see whether this control is operating effectively. So here, evaluate third-party compliance with privacy commitment. Entity has procedures in place to evaluate whether third parties have effective controls to meet the terms of agreement, instructions, or requirements. Many times what happens is that you could have a DPA and you make all your vendors sign the DPA, right? So just merely making your vendors sign the DPA is not enough. So this question is asking, do you have a process to evaluate whether the third party, that is your processors, have effective control to meet whatever they've committed to, right? And then obtains commitment to report unauthorized disclosures, reports actual suspected unauthorized disclosures. A process exists for obtaining commitment from vendors and other third parties to report to the entity actual or suspected unauthorized disclosures or personal information. Basically, what they're asking for is, below your supply chain, are you kind of passing further down in the chain whatever are the requirements that you yourself have in the form of reporting any breaches or something, right? Identifies reporting requirements. Entity has a process for determining whether notification of privacy breach is required, including the method to be used, the timeline, and the identification of recipients of such notifications. Again, if you are subject to multiple jurisdictions, right? For example, you are in the United States, you have 50 states about 50 different privacy laws. Some states say, if you exceed 500 people, there is a reporting requirement. Some states say that you got to report a breach to the state attorney general. Some states say that you got to put it on your website. Some states that you got to reach out to individual data subjects. So there are multiple requirements there, and the timelines also vary. Some state could be 72 hours, some state could be 1 week, some state could be 30 days. So whether you have a defined process whereby you've listed out your reporting requirements about any data breaches. And again, of course, respond to data control request. Respond to data control request for an accounting of personal information held in accordance with service agreements and privacy objectives. Many times what happens is that, if you're data archiving or something, if a controller is receiving a data subject access request and some of the personal data has been shared with processors, before responding to the data subject access request, the controller might ask the processors, hey, do you guys have any personal information of this particular thing? And then only respond to the access request after confirming from the processors as well. So this 617.1 is kind of looking for those controls in place. And if you see the P, this control is required only for processors, not within controllers, because this request will come into the processor from the controller, right? There's the privacy part, risk assessment, risk mitigation, like that. We have got around vulnerability management. There are some additional new points of focus. Entity evaluates vulnerabilities arising from vendors and business partner relationships, including third-party access to the entity's IT systems and connections with third-party networks. Again, I think most of the seasoned people would have seen the kind of prescriptive nature here. So these kind of terminologies you will find in the implementation guidance of ISO 27001, right? Praveen sir, if I may ask you?
Yes.
So what happens is, what is there in the guidance, if it is a formal point of focus, when we as auditors go and audit, we typically ask, what is the control that put in place to satisfy this requirement, right? And that is where I think the greater difficulty comes to organizations in navigating a SOC 2 audit as perhaps compared to ISO 27001 or even 27701. Because the expectation is there must be a defined control to meet this point of focus. Identifies vulnerability of system. So some of them are a little higher level. For example, if you read this point of focus, entity identifies threat to the achievement of its objectives from intentional, including malicious and unintentional acts and environmental events. So environmental events could be perhaps, the result of the Fukushima disaster or whatever, right? So as part of risk assessment, a specific question is being asked out here. They're about risk assessment and risk mitigation. There are 4 new points of focus here. I also wanted to, about incident reporting method, there is incident management and under communication information. If you see here, communicates information to improve privacy, knowledge, and awareness. Entity communicates information to improve privacy, knowledge, and awareness, and to model appropriate behaviors to personnel through a privacy awareness and training program, right? So whether there is a privacy training program or not, but importantly, if you see, this is under security under common criteria, but yeah, this point of focus at times only comes into the picture if the privacy point of focus is also in scope. If the privacy point of focus is not in scope, then CC 2.2.9 might not have to be tested by the auditor.
So,
Okay.
Subbarayudu sir,
Yeah.
very quickly,
Yeah.
2 questions at this point.
Yeah.
So, I think then you will be having a kind of like a statement of applicability or justification document to provide reasons that if you are not, it's not in the scope. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay, that
Yes.
is one. And in the previous slide where you were saying beautifully that certain controls are addressed to the controller organization, certain are addressed to the processor organization. So if I go back to your previous slide, what we are discussing.
Yeah.
So service organizations are typically controller organization. Is that right?
Okay. Okay. If you, I understood where you're coming from.
Yeah.
If you see, some of them are both P and C, right?
Correct. Correct.
Okay. So bulk of these controls, majority of these controls have P and C. Only a few of them, for example, notice. Okay.
Correct.
This
Correct.
is only C. Okay. So there are many controls. In fact, a majority of the control, almost 70, more than 70% of controls apply to both processors and controllers.
Beautiful.
Okay.
Beautiful. This is exactly Navi sir is talking about in his DGPSI, right?
Yes, you have to determine
where in
processor
one
and
place
controller with,
you will be
with reference to data sets and not with reference to the entire organization in its totality.
Super.
Correct?
Great, sir.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
Great. Yeah. Okay, now risk assessment vulnerabilities. Now, one thing that I want to, in let's say in control environment, Navi sir already talked document data flow. Okay, entity document and use internal and external information and data flows to support the design of operation control. Have you documented your data flow? Okay, manages the location of assets, for example. Entity identifies, documents, and maintains records of physical location of custody of information assets, particularly for those stored outside the physical security control of the entity, for example, software and data stored on vendor devices or employee mobile phones under a bring your own device policy. Okay. So you see this kind of specific wording. I just want to, give you a flavor of these. If you read this manages assets, if you read this, management entity identifies, documents, and maintains records of system components such as infrastructure, software, and other information assets. Information assets include physical endpoint devices and systems, virtual systems, data and data flows, external endpoint systems, and organizational roles. Okay, so the thrust is to reduce the ambiguity and be as specific as possible, so as to and this is what makes a SOC 2 audit more tough to navigate and a higher bar to clear. There is less discretion given to the auditor to play around with the applicability or inapplicability of certain components, certain points of focus. I also wanted to where is that there was a incident reporting here. Missed that. It doesn't communicate only. For example, privacy by design that has been in a breach response procedure. If you see under the system operations, resolve security incident applies breach response procedure. Breach response procedures are defined and applied in the event of a confirmed privacy incident. Now, this word confirmed is, I noticed that is a little bit of a amusement. So they are also saying that if it is suspected privacy incident, then perhaps breach response procedure, invocation of breach response procedure is not required by the SOC 2. So they're giving their indication that an organization needs to trigger a breach response procedure only for confirmed privacy incidents. Okay. The procedures are in place to resolve security incidents through closure of vulnerabilities, removal of unauthorized access, and other remediation measures. There's also a new point of focus. I just quickly want to, okay, CC 8.1.18, if you see here, 8.1.15 also, and 8.1, I think in patch management is coming. A process is in place to identify, evaluate, test, approve, and implement patches in a timely manner. System resilience in all of these, because of this hacks and data breaches and all these things. The entity considers system resilience when designing its systems and tests resilience during development to ensure, to help ensure the entity's ability to respond to, recover from, and resume operation through significant disruptions. The other thing, what I really admire about, I find it difficult when I read the ISO points of focus or to some extent, now is even a DGPSI, the implementation specification that we have drafted. If you notice the wordings here, right, it contains the complete span resilient during development to help ensure the entity is able to respond to, recover from, and resume operation through significant disruption. Like you'll find these kind of comma-separated requirements which span an entire cycle of the entire process. If you see privacy by design, entity considers privacy requirements in the design of its systems and processes and limits the collection of processing of personal information to what it is. So data minimization and privacy by design both clubbed into one single requirement. And this is under common control, but once again, this CC 8.1.18 will only be applicable in case the privacy principle is in scope. If an organization says, I'll only assess myself for security, confidentiality, and availability, and maybe when processing integrity, but I want to keep privacy out of scope, then CC 8.1.18 will not be in scope. So, but if an organization says that I want to basis for privacy, then it is the responsibility of auditors to go and check whether they have a privacy design policy and whether they have implemented it or not. And similar things we find in 27701 as well, right?
Yeah.
Sir?
Yeah. So, Subbarayudu sir, very good question here. Now, as an auditor, do you have right to question them looking at their justification document or SOA? Let's say somebody has removed CC 8.1.15, which I feel, right, it is applicable to any organization that you need to have a kind of resilience system in place. Now, can they say no? And then do you have a right to raise it that, hey, you cannot say no? Do you have right?
Absolutely. I have a right to question it. And as an auditor, I always have a right, if I disagree, then this is where the difference of ISO 27001 and SOC 2 again comes into picture. There are very strict standards there. Of course, I mean, extent of implementation might vary from auditor to auditor. But what happens is that in case there is a disagreement, and the management refuses to accede to your request, for example, right? Then there is a predefined list of options available to the auditor, including resigning from the audit or giving a qualification report. Qualified report, and mentioning the reasons for that. So I think it's just about a couple of more slides. Physical and logical access. I think this is the last one. Yes, 7-year focus. If you say, for example, role-based access come in, reviews access roles and rules. The appropriateness of access roles and access rules is reviewed on a periodic basis for unnecessary and inappropriate individuals. For example, employees, contractors, vendors, business partner personnel, and inappropriate system or service accounts. Access roles and rules are modified as appropriate. Remove physical devices, when people leave the organization, are assets being returned or not. So if you see, I think this was my last slide. I am done, and in case I rushed through some of the earlier points of focus, if we can read it, or I can also leave the floor open to classifies information. There's a new point of focus. The entity classifies information by relevant characteristics. For example, personally identifiable information, confidential customer information, and intellectual property to support identification of threats to the information and the design and operation of controls. So likewise, you'll find the terminology many times in the SOC 2 points of focus reduces the scope for individual auditor discretion. And in case of any deviations, the justification they have to provide have to be that much more strict. So that is where I had determined security events are evaluated to determine whether they could or did result in unauthorized disclosure or use of personal information, whether there has been a failure to comply with applicable laws or regulations. So like that, you'll find some specific things there. So that's it. I think I have come to the end of my presentation. I hope exactly dot on time, 8 o'clock.
Subbarayudu sir,
very exhaustive. Thanks for that.
Yeah.
But I think we will need the slides for reference.
Anyway, Manju will share the link.
Yeah, sir, one question from the aspect of normally if you come from an IS, I'm just asking it a very basic question.
Yeah.
From a cycle of certification, because I know this is not certification, this is attestation of the thing. How does it go from a cyclic thing? Because certification for ISO is a 3-year cycle with surveillance 1 and 2 there. And there is also always, this bothers me, one thing is a bridge report, which is asked.
Bridge letter, correct.
Yeah. So these are two things I just wanted to, basic thing that I wanted to understand.
See, typically what will happen is this is one area where for some reason, for better known wisdom, ACP gives some guidelines, but not made very explicit or clear, hard-cut rules there. Okay, what they say is that the first type 2 audit, for example, okay, can be for a period of less than 12 months. But most usually the audit cycle is a 12-month cycle. Okay. But they have left the door open that there can be certain circumstances where the audit period can be either more or less. But at the same time, they also mentioned this. In fact, a lot of arguments at times come up. In fact, I think I might have something already open on this front also, because what they say is, let us say if a client comes and says, why can't you perform an audit for 15 months? Okay. Then the question is, for the 12-month, there could be certain controls that you can justify. But for the 3-month period, let's say you have a control that only operates the frequency of annual. For example, vulnerability is external VA, you will be doing once in 12 months. Or external PT, you will be doing once in 12 months. Right? Then what is the evidence that you can give for additional 3 months is what the question is. Therefore, if you talk in terms of practical things, right? Most SOC 2 type 2 audit reports will be for 12 months, except for the very first one. Okay.
Okay.
And thereafter, it will be a 12-monthly cycle for renewing those audit reports.
Sure.
But exceptions can be made.
And bridge letter?
Bridge letters typically means, let's say, is required when, so let's say you have a 12-month audit report, but let's say the 12-month, lots of companies might be 1st July to 31st June cycle, for example, right? So my 12-month cycle, my SOC 2 audit report, type 2 report is covering 1st of August to 31st July, the 12-month period, okay? But let us say the client organization, okay, you are a cloud service customer, AWS is giving a report that only ends on 31st of August. And let us say you need a SOC 2 type 2 report for, let's say, the full calendar year, correct?
Okay.
Then what happens is that I, as an auditor, know that your sub-service organization controls have been tested only for, let's say, 8 months of this calendar year. Their balance 4 months, September, October, November, December are open, correct?
Okay.
So in that case, what happens is that you insist on a bridge letter that the audit client will obtain from the sub-service organization. So AWS has to give a bridge letter saying that the same controls that were audited for the previous period of, let's say, 12-month period of ending 31st of August, right? The same controls were operating for the balance 4 months also, and that they have no reason to believe, while that those controls might be operating ineffectively. Okay. So this bridge letter is a letter that is given by sub-service organization to the service organization, which he can onward pass to his CP auditor, okay, to cater to the mismatches in the audit cycles, okay, between the service organization and the sub-service organization.
Okay. So it is mostly for sub-service organization, which is asked by the service organization. Is that
by the service organization, the auditor, correct? Yeah.
Okay. And just a follow-up quick question on the new version that you have mentioned. How does an service organization go about migrating or complying with the new requirements that have been mentioned as per the new AICPA requirement for SOC 2?
See, typically, if they already have a CPA who is doing the SOC 2 audit, right? They can reach out to them and find out, what is the new control and what does it take to implement those new controls. They can reach out to them, and the current auditor can tell them. Okay. And typically, in a lot of companies, what happens is that if an organization who's been getting SOC 2 audits conducted for the last 6 years, 7 years, or something, you have people within the organization also who have got a great deal of familiarity with the SOC 2 ecosystem. And they themselves, upgrade themselves, read, learn that knowledge. But definitely, communication with their existing SOC 2 auditors would be in line, so that there are no surprises when uh, uh, the next 12 monthly audit comes up. Okay.
Subbarayudu garu,
Yeah, yes, sir.
how many new controls have been included in the 22 version?
See, again, we
Numerically.
call them points of focus, sir, because the number of controls in between, the difference between control and point of focus. Okay.
Point of focus, how many new?
Yeah. There are about 38 of them, sir.
38.
Yeah.
Okay. As per the
And adding-
AICPA guidance,
Uh,
since what date this has to be, for example, in 24 or 25, from which date every organization who want to be certified for SOC type 2 has to follow this 22 version?
See, they came out with this on 15th of October 2022. Okay. So there was some transition period. I'm not very clear, but definitely all current audits that are going on are going as the 2022 standards only. Okay. Whatever audit that we're doing right now, okay, there, in fact, we migrated to this almost 3 to 4 months ago, maybe even before that. Okay. Yeah, we're in 24 actually. Sorry, I'm forgetting. I thought we were in 23.
We're in 24 now.
Yeah. Sorry?
Almost 15 months are over.
Yeah.
From what date compulsorily an organization has to follow only 22 version controls?
I will check that out. Definitely, any engagement after April 2023, no? Okay. Should definitely be done as per the new standard, no doubt about it. But let us say if there is a 12-month period, correct? There will be some transition arrangements there. I'll refer to that particular book, and I read it at that point in time. I've forgotten about that. Okay. But one thing is for sure, sir. If today any SOC 2 audit is going on, right? It has got to be the 2022 standard only and SSI 21 only. You cannot mention SSI 18 anywhere. So the moment you refer to SSI 21, the new standard comes into the picture. Okay. Maybe I can just get back to you on that one. If transition date or something. Could be maybe December 22 or so any new engagement starting after Jan 23 perhaps, maybe max April 23, not later than that. But I'll get back to you on that one. Huh?
Okay. I think in the SOC 2K, there's no migration as such.
Sorry?
I'm right. In the SOC type 2, SOC 2, there's no concept of migration from this version to that version. That next version is not there. That migration
I
only
don't
in
know
case of
what you mean
ISO.
by migration there. Can you tell me what you mean by migration?
Whenever a company want to be assessed or attested by the SOC 2 type 2, what are the date specified by the AICPA as to from that date onwards, the new version need to be followed.
That date has been published. That date has been published. I'll look into the book and say when exactly that date has been specified. Maybe let me see. What if you? Yeah. They published that definitely. Yeah. No, we lost you, sir. Not clear. Adepu, sir?
The Adepo got disconnected.
He got disconnected.
Navi sir, any questions?
No, fine.
So, Subbarayudu sir, very quickly, since now you had gone through our DGPSI also, can this be done through DGPSI?
In fact, we have to start that mapping. I have told Navi sir to do that mapping. I have to put some people into that. See,
So
definitely.
even if we have to do, Ramesh sir, this will definitely be not DGPSI, it will be DGPSI Advanced.
Or US? DGPSI US version.
Anyway, certification is not possible. Only thing is,
Correct.
we have to say that whatever are the
Attestation,
requirements in this are also covered in the DGPSI.
Correct.
That's what we can say even for ISO 27701. This will not be a ISO 27701 certification, or this will not be a SOC 2 certification. But PSI, we are trying to incorporate the suggestions made in these frameworks also in some way or the other. Obviously, everybody is trying to get privacy, so within that boundaries only everybody has to work. So there is nothing different, except that like SOC 2, perhaps we have combined certain management issues, governance issues into the privacy issues. Whereas maybe ISO in the latest versions is also coming towards that. Maybe earlier versions were not focusing much on governance. I don't know. Okay. So ultimately, the framework has to converge into a similar requirement.
Correct.
What we are saying is that by adopting an indigenous methodology, maybe we will reduce the cost.
Correct. Implementation and others.
SMEs and others may find it better. That's all.
Yeah, I think at least if even 60% of the requirements are met, the transition to the other standard become that much easier and simpler and quicker for organizations.
Yeah.
Right. Good. Manju?
Adappa sir has joined. So, sir, you want to complete your question? Earlier you were saying something. Okay. Thank you, Subbarayudu sir. For giving such a comprehensive presentation, even at such a short notice. I understand. I invite Mr. Ramesh Venkataraman for the closing remarks.
You already said so. Very comprehensive, very, very detailed, crisp. Thank you very much, Subbarayudu sir. Really, quite interesting what you talked about that first, and the last few slides. What I understand is, Avi sir, if you're really that some of the controls, right? If you really look at it, the combination of 27001, 27701, and some of the frameworks, even like IEC standard, 81000-1, I could see that the traces there in the controls. That's why I put that question. I know that this DGPS cannot be used for this. They will not allow. It's a different system per se, but we have a kind of mapping, I could say easily. Now, Subbarayudu sir, whenever you are free, let's start that actually. I would be really interested so that we have all that mappings. Because if you say already a mapping existing between the focus points of this, right, SOC, with respect to 27001, we will take that as the base and then map it with the 50, it is easy. You don't have to go now 50 now. Correct, no?
Yeah, correct. See, the predecessor to this 2022 framework, the 2017 one, on the ACP side, they had already published it. They had said that some 53% overlap with 27001 is there. Now, I don't know. I think that was excluding privacy, perhaps. Okay.
Right.
The way I describe this is, you have something of ISO 31000 enterprise risk management. Also, where the risk management that you do has got more the flavor of enterprise risk management in SOC 2 than pure endpoint security risk management alone. So
but that 31,000 guideline you are talking.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Great. Once again, really, sir, Navi sir, any inputs from you, any points from your side? Okay, no. Great. Otherwise, thank you very much, Mr. Subbarayudu sir. As usual, your sessions are always great, really, and looking forward to have further discussions, right? Continued one. Team, thank you very much for joining. I could see still you guys are on in the call. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening. Thank you.